Got an old warhorse to show you guys today. The Berthier M16 Cavalry Carbine. Check this thing out with me. But before we get started, don't forget to check out our friends over there, Workaday Custom Gun Leather, custom made to order. Go ahead and check them out. Well, I've been wanting to do this one for a long time. The Berthier M16 is an old cavalry carbine from World War I. Yes, it's a French carbine. So I can already hear you laughing, you know, never fired and dropped once, right? Well, that's not exactly the case. So if you look into your history, especially World War I, the French were a very, very formidable enemy. Militarily, they were definitely a military power. They were right up there with the Ottomans, the Germans, and even the Americas too. And they had been like that for probably a couple hundred years. Remember, Napoleon conquered half the world, so the French are not as weak as they like to say. Well, that joke actually comes from World War II, long after this rifle was in play. And basically it's referencing toward the swift defeat of the French at the hands of the Germans during Blitzkrieg. So the story behind that, to keep it brief anyway, the French did what many governments often do. They planned for the last war, not for the future war. So if you're familiar with World War I at all, you know that the majority of it was trench warfare, which obviously led to stalemate and then a whole lot of suffering and a prolonged war. So in the aftermath of World War I, after the Kaiser had already been defeated, what the French did was they developed what was called the Maginot Line. Now the Maginot Line was a long series of trenches and fortifications along the French-German border, and they were also backed by the Argonne Forest over there. Well, the mentality was, based on previous experience, which, you know, they didn't plan for the future, they planned for the past. They anticipated more trench warfare, so obviously they fortified and entrenched. And they were hoping, as it had worked before, that the Argonne Forest was so thick and dense that the Germans couldn't possibly pass through the thick forest with enough men and equipment to cause any kind of real threat to the line. Well, because they didn't plan for the future, they planned for the past. They didn't take into account technological advances. Airplanes. The Germans simply flew right over the line and then bombed the crap out of it. That was it. Total failure. And as for the Argonne Forest, the Germans just simply cut through it, brought their tanks straight across like it was nothing. And then, obviously, Blitzkrieg came through and France fell very quickly. But, based on that, that's not really enough to say, outside of a joke anyway, that the French were cowardice or weak. No, they were very, very strong, very formidable. So which brings us back to the Berthier right here. Without getting into too much history, the French actually outfitted the first army that would go out on the front lines with smokeless powder, and that was the Lebel rifle. The Lebel rifle was still in the lines back in World War I, but the Berthiers also came into play as well. Now the original Berthiers were actually rifle, but you also had, at the time, horseback cavalry. So naturally, like most armies prior to and at the time, they had to shorten down their rifles and do cavalry carbines like this one. Now the M16 here came obviously in 1916, and along with it came some upgrades. Talking upgrades, the first series of Berthier carbines, they can only fire off an M-block clip of 3 rounds. Well, the M16 here came with the upgrade of 5 rounds. And that's a big deal when it comes down to fighting in trench warfare, especially if you're on horseback. Now, what you had at the time, obviously, there were several armies that were still outfitted with single-shot rifles. And the idea at the time was still volley fire. You guys heard the adage, I'm sure. World War I was fought with outdated tactics with modern technology. Bad move. Sending lines of men over the top of your trench into oncoming machine gun fire. Meanwhile, simultaneously facing down aimed artillery fire. It was a bad time for these guys. But anyway, back to the carbine. So, you got 5 rounds in the M-block magazine now, and it goes into the fixed magazine here. Now at the bottom here, you can open it up to drop the magazine and the rounds if you wanted to. It's got a turn down bolt. And you pull it up. Now it's really stiff, and that there was a purpose behind that, because obviously if you're on horseback you don't want your bolt coming loose and flapping all over the place. It's nice and stiff and locks in tight, and then obviously it pulls back there. It's going to be a push feed bolt, okay? The Mausers had the controlled feed, the French didn't have that, and obviously it'll load in just like that. It'll cock the back piece right there. You'll see on here is the saddle ring, which will hold on to a lanyard that was obviously attached to the cavalry rider. And then up top, one of the upgrades off of one of the old Berthier carbines was the top instead of having the exposed barrel, it actually has wood up here to cover it, because this thing gets hot when you shoot it. It's a hot round, and I'll tell you about those in a second. And over here you're going to see a stacking rod right here and a bayonet lug right there. So even though you wouldn't really expect to see a cavalryman running with a bayonet, well, at the time the French actually went to all efforts to try and outfit this thing the best they could. So we now have heat protection and the capability for a bayonet. Now the sights here are actually pretty decent. They're flat top notch sights, and it's going to have on the side here range markers going from, it looks like, 200 to 1,000 meters. Okay, not yards, meters. Remember, we're talking about the French here. This is European. But on top of it, you can also flip the sights up too, and it's got extra yards. Pretty darn cool. These rifles at the time were very optimistic about their range, but I have no doubt they could still hit what they're aiming at if they're doing volley fire. Now the front sight is a very thick, very simple fixed front sight. It's really nothing to write home about. And a lot of the soldiers didn't much care for it, but from my experience anyway, as far as I can say, it's easy to pick up the sights on the rifle really easily. Now we're talking about the bang here. You have an M-block clip right here that goes right into the rifle, and I'll show you the loading mechanism in a second. And you have these 8mm Lebel rounds. These things are pretty darn nasty. They are stout. Now if you look, you'll see that they're rimmed cartridges, and that's to facilitate the end block clip, so obviously they're going to load easier. And after you've expended all 5 rounds, you'll have to open up that trap door on the bottom of your magazine to drop the clip out. And it loads up pretty darn easy. Just open her up, put your clip in there, and then push it down. And you'll see it live action in a moment. So let's get to shooting this thing. So I'm going to set out a target at 50 yards, 115 yards, and if we still have daylight, we're going to go for the 200. So when we go to load this thing up, open her up just like that, put your M block clip in there, and then what you're going to do is, it's not like an infield where you're just going to strip it out of the clip. You send the whole thing right down the tube, just like that. Now one thing about the Berthier carbine is, you got to remember, this is a cavalry carbine. This is meant to be light and fast, okay? So what they had back in World War I, they were still using magazine cutoffs, meaning you would have a device on here that would prevent any feeding from the magazine, so you would have to individually put rounds in there for single shot action for volley fire. And of course, if things got serious, or if the order was given, you'd switch off the magazine cutoff, and then you could use the remaining rounds in the magazine. The Berthier does not have that. It's straight 5 rounds. And again, because this was meant to be a light, fast cavalry rifle for mounted cavalrymen, so they needed to be up there and doing it. Now you got to remember, when you're out shooting this thing, and you're going to see the recoil on this, they're on horseback, facing artillery fire, facing machine gun fire, going through trenches and barbed wire and all sorts of other craziness going on at the time. So this right here, it's kind of humbling holding this darn thing. And you can see there's heavy use on this thing too, so this has been places. But anyway, that's enough talk. Let's get to shooting. Alright, 50 yards. Whoa! That's got some bite. Yes, it does. Holy cow. It's got a weak ejector on there. Jeez. Oh, it's definitely a thumper. Holy cow. Alright, so that's 5 rounds. Let's drop that stripper clip out, and there she comes, straight out. Let's go see how we did at 50. Well, at 50 yards, this is not what I would call an impressive group. Look at that. It's got a very severe recoil on there, but sights were placed right here. I was expecting to actually go high, but it does have the correct mil-spec load of 200 grains. So elevation's actually where it should be, I suppose. Alright, well that went about as well as you can expect it to. So now we're going to reach out to 115. Now the thing about the Berthier is the sights. The sights are obviously going to be calibrated for longer ranges. So the base setting down here at 0 that we were just shooting at 50 yards with is the same as 200. So at 100, theoretically, it should be hitting about the same. So let's see how it works. I didn't hear a hit. So let's try again. Alright, I was aiming a little bit lower. God, that thing thumps. These glasses gotta go. So it's 3 rounds and no known strikes that I can tell. So I gotta find out where these things are going. Low and left. So I'll load it up one more time so we can get some good shots on there. Alright, so I'm not really getting many dings down there. So I'm not thinking I'm going out to 200 today. Let's check this out. Well, all I'm seeing is what looks like 2 impacts. That's not boding very well. So that's at 100. I'll have to look at the target cam footage to see where the rest of it's going. But yeah, that's not really looking that great. Well, to be honest, I'm pretty disappointed I'm not getting the accuracy I was hoping for. So we're here at 100. We're not doing 200. We're losing light too quickly. I want to at least try and get 5 dings on this thing. So if it ends up being point of aim, point of impact issue, that's fine. But if this thing's just scattering all over the darn place, there's not much I can do with that. Now, taking into account it is a well over 100-year-old rifle, and it's been through hell and back, literally. You know, there's something to be said about that, but here's the hoping. So 5 dings at 115. Cross your fingers. There's 1. Good hit. I'm aiming center mass now, so maybe that was the issue. Maybe it's not. Good hit. Let's do a couple more. I believe in this thing. If it is what I'm hoping it is, on another video we can go back and do the 200. Now my other stripper clips, obviously they're not pre-charged here because I was having issues with them. This is a good one. But if I can get performance on this last volley here, if I can make a ding and I can group it reasonably, we can revisit for the 200. I mean, it's a hard kicking rifle. It really is. Alright, so let's try it. These stripper clips give me a lot of problems. Last one. Alright. Having some equipment issues here, especially with the stripper clips. I think I got the sights figured out. That's not an issue. Alright, so I adjusted my point of aim to make sure that I was good to go, and I was right here, center mast. So it definitely favors to the right, so I'll have to shift a little bit to the left if I want to make sure I'm getting good accurate hits. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 splashes right there. Now let me look at something real quick. Yep, sure enough, that's for all the ones that I was missing. They're going to the right. They tore the tree up. Ouch. Well, guys, obviously I'm losing light here, and I'm being eaten alive by the mosquitoes. It's beginning of August, so yeah, what do you expect, right? So we'll count this as a part 1, because after I was able to correct the point of aim, point of impact issue, we were getting some good dings down there at 100, and it was a fair group for what it is. Interesting. It's an interesting carbine, and it poses its own set of challenges I'm seeing. So I think we're going to come back, we're going to revisit this. I want to put some more rounds down range before I actually take it out to 200, just so I can make sure that I'm on point. But from what I'm seeing, with the 200 grain pill, the mil-spec pill, it hits the same at 50, it hits the same at 100. And if the sights are correct, it'll hit the same at 200, essentially, give or take. For the time being, because of the mosquitoes and because it's getting dark out, we gotta call it a day. Which sucks, but I mean, what are you gonna do, right? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time.